Wayne Hussey of The Mission. Welcome to 69 Faces of Rock. How are you doing today?
I'm all right. It's a day off, so I'm taking it easy. I'm recuperating from the rigors of being on the road on tour. Now it's not that bad, you know. We've just played two shows on, so we're getting on a bit. We have to take our leisure time.
And that's good.
With
Well,
pleasure. With pleasure. Yes.
day off. Hopefully you're ready for the onslaught of questions I have ready here for you.
Well, I guess so. Yeah.
Uh,
Fire open.
since you're not promoting anything new, I'm gonna probably just ask you about the overview of your career, which is in itself is an interesting story. So I guess for you, everything begins with Sisters of Mercy. How important was that band in your musical development?
Well, firstly, I wouldn't say it all began with the Sisters of Mercy. I was in bands from the age of about 14, 15 years old, obviously the school band. And then the school band left school and we started gigging around Bristol. And I left Bristol, moved to Liverpool, and I was in a few bands up there, made my first records with bands in Liverpool. Joy Division supported us once
Wow.
um, in my first band. Then I joined Dead or Alive. You spin me right round, baby,
Right.
line. Yeah, yeah. So I was in them for a little while, and then I went disco, and they didn't need guitars anymore. So I thought, okay, I'm off. And then I played with Pauline Murray and the Invisible Girls, which Pauline used to sing with the band. Well, she still does actually. A band called Penetration. She went solo for a while, and we did some recording with Martin Hannett, the famed producer who did the Joy Division albums. And so all this is all kind of my apprenticeship. And then I joined the Sisters in September-ish, 1983. Lasted 2 years in the employ of a certain Mr. Eldridge, which is longer than most. Yeah, no, the Sisters was, I mean, for me, it was, I look back at it, it was a very important time in my life because for the first time I was in a band that toured extensively. I can't say it was the first band I made record with because I released a few records before that. But it was the first band I toured extensively. We acquired a few habits, shall we say, along the way. Um, then obviously that kind of combusted internally, and me and Craig decided to form our own band. Essentially because Andrew didn't want to tour anymore. I mean, Craig and I loved touring and we wanted to have fun. And I mean, and I don't know what Andrew's like these days. I haven't seen him in many years, but it wasn't an awful lot of fun with Andrew.
Uh, Before even you became The Mission, there was this sisterhood band. Can you
Ah,
explain
yeah,
the whole dilemma to me?
yeah. Well, when we left the Sisters, we first thing we did was went into the studio and recorded some demos and stuff. And we didn't have a name; it was just me and Craig, and we borrowed the drummer from Red Lorry, Yellow Lorry. And then we sent the demos to our record label, which were Warner Brothers at the time. And just on the cassette, I just put the Sisters because we didn't have a name, we didn't have a band, it was just me and Craig. And then not long after that, Billy Duffy, a good friend of ours from the Colts, came to see us rehearse one day. Said, "Hey, you're great. Come on tour with us." And we didn't have a name. So it was like, well, you know what? We just call ourselves a sisterhood for the time being. I mean, we knew it would antagonize Andrew, but it was also the name that a group of fans they called themselves that followed the sisters around. So we just used that. I mean, knowing full well that at some point we would have to change it, but we just didn't have a name. Could have been anything, but we chose that. I mean, and at least that way, some people kind of knew that where we came from.
Eventually
It,
became The Mission. When did you adopt that name?
the sisterhood.
The Mission.
Well, we did the cult tour as the sisterhood, and then we played three UK shows, maybe March, April that same year, 1986. And at first, by that point, we'd already had the name, come up with the name, the Mission, and we unveiled the name at the first of those three UK shows. So we only did the cult European tour as the sisterhood.
As you formed this new band, did you already have a concept in mind, or it sort of developed as you went along?
I kind of had a concept in mind, but it also developed as well. I mean, you know, when as I said, when we first started the band, basically all Craig and I wanted to do was go out and tour, you know, stay out on tour, you know, because it's a good life when you're 20 in your early 20s, you know.
Absolutely.
And yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. You know, and you get your cigarettes, you get your booze, and you know, you get your drugs, and um, how can we say? Yes, you're attracted to the opposite sex in a way that maybe you wouldn't be if you weren't in a band.
King Crimson, the ladies of the road.
Yeah, yes. Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, they were girls, really, not ladies, because I mean, they were, you know, youngish.
Um, so you have this new band, and you have some
Yeah,
early.
yeah. Sorry, yeah. The concept was I wanted the band. It was like a cross between, and I thought I still think of us in this way. It was a cross like between the Cure, U2, and Led Zeppelin. And I think that's you know, if somebody was to ask me, okay, how would you define the Mission sound? And I would say it's somewhere in amongst all of that.
That actually makes sense, and I think it was the Led Zeppelin part that got me attracted in the band initially.
Yeah, yeah, Led Zeppelin were great. You know, but like when you know 1986 when we came around, they you know they couldn't be arrested. Led Zeppelin was so unfashionable, certainly in Britain. You know, and then there was us espousing their greatness, and then you say, look at these old hippies. It's like, yeah, well, this is what we like, you know. And lo and behold, there were, you know, within a few years, there was kind of a reassessment of the Zeppelin heritage, if you want, the canon of work that they'd committed to vinyl and stuff. And yeah, Zeppelin were great. You know, they were a great band. I could see why the critics didn't like them when they were around. You know, it's very similar to us. They, you know, they released their first album, and then all of a sudden they were very successful. Same for us. The critics hated us as well at the same, you know, for the same reason, I believe, in the first for the first album.
Both you and Zeppelin outlived the critics.
Absolutely. Where are they now, eh?
Right. Anyways, so I'm going to show you some records, and you will tell me whatever comes to your mind. So here is the first chapter, which really is compilation of your early EPs. What do you remember from that time?
I remember everything being very exciting and fresh, and you know, we were living on the breadline. You know, we had to borrow money to finish the first single from Craig's dad. I knew I'd made some money from Dead or Alive that but was in the pipeline, so we were waiting for that to come in publishing, and that paid for the second single. You know, so it was all really like, you know, hand to mouth really at the time. You know, and we were all signing on the dole, but we were starting to play shows and starting to release the records, and the records were starting to sell and be popular, and we were starting to, you know, tour out in Europe as well. And it was, yeah, it was a really exciting time. Of course, it was. I mean, this you've got to remember, this is all within the space of 6 months of leaving the Sisters of Mercy. We formed a new band. We had wrote a whole set of new songs, an album worth of new songs, two EPs that are included on that album, and most of God's Own Medicine. And we were out touring extensively. We were playing the big festivals in Europe, way above bands that had been around for years and years, you know. And of course, the, that makes the press suspicious of, you know, why this band hasn't paid their dues. You know, it's that kind of thing. You know what I mean? We haven't built them up. That they've done this on their own. Well, we're going to knock them down.
Well, God's Own Medicine. Again, MTV picked it up. You had the clip in real rotation, not just the 120 minutes, but you actually broke out of that mold, and things were starting to happen. So, what impact did this album make?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, but that one. I mean, if when people ask me what my favorite album is from our, you know, from our catalog, I generally say that one because of it being the first album. As you say, the first chapter was a compilation of the first two EPs, really. So I don't really consider that as an album in the sense of making an album as an album, if that makes sense. Well, God's Own Medicine was an album, at the start, and and in those days you had side one and side two. So obviously, you had to sequence the songs. I spent many a night with cassettes trying to work out what order the songs should run in. And it was a very exciting time. We recorded that album within 3 weeks because we've been out playing most of the songs live. So it was just a case of getting them down, and making them sound good. I think it sounds of its time, but I also think when I do hear it, when I have to listen to songs for maybe to learn for a tour or something, I think it still sounds very fresh. It sounds innocent. It sounds naive, which are things that we very quickly lost. The innocence and the naivety, and that's not something you can replicate once you've had experience.
No, not at all. And I think back to those early MTV days and seeing the clip for Wasteland, and I'm thinking something is there, right? Something is there, and that kind of got me on board. And with
Yeah.
your next album, I was truly on board. This probably is my favorite, Children, produced
Yeah,
by.
it's a lot of people's favorites. I think that was an album. I mean, where we closed ranks with John Paul Jones producing. Obviously, we kind of adopted the Zeppelin pose, where we wouldn't let any of the record company into the studio. We recorded what we wanted to record, how we wanted to record. They tried to stick their nose in, but in the end, it's a record we wanted to make at that point. And John and the engineer Mark Spike Stent helped us realize that. And in that, for that alone, it for me it's quite a complete album. It's not, it's very difficult just to pick one song off that album. Really, I mean, obviously we do, because we can't play it all live, but it's it's it it's an album that works from side one. It's in Heaven on Earth, it's Beyond the Pale, We're Gonna Prayer, a couple of little noises, and then there's finishes with Heaven on Earth and Tower Strength, and then the second side it's a little bit more diverse. But I've said this before. For me, when I listen to it now, I mean, again, it sounds of its time. It sounds there's too much reverb on the record for me, but that's what we wanted at the time.
Yeah,
That flew in the face of what was fashionable. But again, I've never really considered the mission to be fashionable. I never wanted the mission to be fashionable, you know.
I
But it's an album for me that we were trying to reach for the stars, but we didn't quite get that far. Maybe we got to the moon.
I recall a very spiritual show in Chicago at the Metro at that time, which great performance, great performance.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we were talking about Metro the other day, actually. We haven't played there for a long time. When we played last year was the Thalia Hall, I think.
Oh, yeah, I did see that show. That was actually outstanding. Great job.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed that one. Yeah, yeah. Chicago's always been kind to us.
Oh, we love you. Um,
Yeah.
on top of it, if John Paul Jones was not enough, you also did a tour with Robert Plant on Children.
Yeah,
Both,
yeah. Oh, it was getting to meet our heroes. I mean, the thing about being in a band and then suddenly becoming popular and stuff is that people want to meet you. And it's not just us wanting to meet Iggy Pop, or I want to hang out with Robert Smith or Snog Susie or whatever. These people actually introduced themselves to us. So it was when you're a kid, we get into this because we love music. We have our heroes. I still have my heroes. It's still a huge thrill when I meet somebody whose music I really admire. And most, in my experience, most musicians are actually really decent folk. Really easy to get on with. We know, because we know how we all live. We know what we will have to go through to do what we want to do. So I mean, Billy Corgan's become a friend of mine actually over the last 9 years or something. We communicate every now and then via email. We actually went stayed at Billy's, me and Craig, a few years ago, in about 2016, and all we did all week was play Sisters of Mercy songs with him.
It never seems to go away, right?
Yeah, no, it was fun, you know. I mean, Billy was, you know, or you know, he claims to be a big fan of my guitar playing, and so you know, he said, come up to Chicago. Do you think Craig would come? We could set up some gear in his living room that overlooks the lake out there. I don't know. It's you know, an old house that overlooks the lake there, and it was just after New. Actually, it was. We arrived there the day Bowie died.
Oh, I actually remember that day.
Yeah, so we were, you know, so we were there yeah, and yeah, we just for like 4 or 5 days just played in his living room. We had blazing fire there, playing Sisters of Mercy songs with Billy singing. It was fun.
Any recordings of that exist?
They do. Billy recorded it. He had his right hand man, his engineer guy coming, Nicola. He's from um, Hungary or something like that. Actually, he came and recorded it, but Billy's never. I've asked him for the tapes. He won't let me have them. I think he's afraid I'll let him out.
Um, Carved in the Sand, probably your most successful album in the US. You even
Probably the most successful album in the world, actually.
yep. You went from Metro to the Vic.
Yeah, no, well, yeah. I mean, it in a way that was the one album. I think looking back at it, it it became a bit of a formula that we were kind of adhering to. I mean, I think side one of that, well, you know, what constitutes side one is actually Perfect Mission.
Mhm.
You know, you got Amelia, Into the Blue, I think, Butterfly, Sea of Love, and Deliverance. That side is like quintessential Mission.
You can play that live anytime, and people will go crazy.
Yeah, yeah. And then side two kind of goes a bit wishy-washy here and there. And then, you know, there's a couple of songs on there that I wish weren't. You know, there were other songs we'd recorded at the same time that I wish we put on instead.
I
It's
have
like Grip
some
of Disease.
metal album.
Yeah, that like Grip of Disease and Heaven Sends You, I like, and yeah, you know, yeah. I mean, those are like studio outtakes and bits and bobs, B-sides and stuff that happened. Again, I mean, it was we had the stuff and we just wanted to put it out. You know, not every country in the world were we selling vast amounts of vinyl singles. So, you know, there was a lot of stuff that people weren't hearing at that point.
Yeah, definitely a very creative time in band's history since you're able to amass that many songs.
Yeah, I know. I remember going away to the Black Mountains on the border of England and Wales for a couple of weeks, and I gave myself this task of writing one new song per day. So I had a little 4-track machine and a little drum machine and a bass. I would write one tune a day. So I came out of there with about 20 odd tunes, you know. And I had to write words for them, which is always the hardest part of the process for me.
True. Then came The Mask, and all of a sudden your profile kind of went down a little bit.
Oh yeah. Well, everybody. I mean, you know, that's an album. I look back at that album and I feel that it's an album that I had to make. I had to make, not necessarily the band. I had to make it. You know, as I said before, I think with Carbon Sand, we kind of got into a routine, a formula, and I wanted to break that. And we also released that at a time when the world was going rock and we went pop, you know, Nirvana and everything was, and also I think a band like us, unless you crack America, particularly, your shelf life is limited, you know, because young kids grow up and they have jobs and stuff and families, and then and the younger kids coming through I don't know, Stone Roses came after us, Happy Mondays, and Suede, and their whole Brit pop thing. Yeah, and that's what kids were into. Every generation has to have its own heroes, its own, favorite bands. And I think in a way that at that point, because we hadn't cracked America, if you crack America, I think you can you can stay pretty much relevant throughout the world, actually, but we didn't. And we started to go a bit with Mask. But I still contend it's an album I had to make, and there are some great songs on that record. I
Absolutely.
think it's the first album I wrote lyrics for, not under the influence of drugs.
Mm. Okay, that's a good revelation.
Well,
Um,
there's a clarity to the lyrics on that album that wasn't there before, I think.
I think people should give this one another listen for that reason
Yeah,
alone.
I think well, there are certain factions of our audience that are, fortunately, they're kind of look going back and say, yeah, you know what, Mask isn't that bad. There's a couple of things we skip, but there's really good songs on there, and you could, forget them. You wish they didn't have the saxophone on there, but
It has its moment.
yeah, yes, it does. I mean, as I say, I think it's an album I had to make creatively.
Then came Neverland, released actually on my birthday in 1995.
Wow, how old were you?
How old am I? Five
No,
five.
how old were you then?
How old was I then? 95. Wow, I'll take away what, 25 years? About 25. Yeah.
Yeah, okay, all right, good. So yeah, okay, Neverland. Yeah, no, Neverland. I mean, again, that was the band was in transition. We started making that record whilst we were still with Phonogram, Polygram now, or Universal now, actually. But during the course of the album, weren't hearing singles and stuff like that, and then it was like, so we're not going to renew your contract. It's okay, okay. Can we take these tapes with us? Yes, and they said yeah. So let's take them. So we took tapes, and then we ended up releasing it through an independent, well, different territories independently. I think actually, I don't even know if it had an official release here in the
Oh,
US actually.
I ended up getting those as imports.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it, but again, it's again, I think there's some great songs on that record. It would have been better if we'd had somebody producing it other than myself. I was wearing too many hats at that point. Singer, songwriter, main guitarist, producer. And that's a lot of hats to wear, and at one time.
Sometimes
And
who kind of directs the clarity of the focus.
yeah, I mean, you just, yeah, you get to, yeah. I mean, it's nice to be able to walk away and let somebody else take the reins for a little bit, and just go and watch some television, or even just go and work on lyrics.
Yeah. Blue, Blue. You continue with that. It seemed like a record to fulfill any obligations, and then basically you split the band.
Not really. It was well at the point at that time we earlier we'd signed a big merchandise deal, and we were still paying that off the advance from 1990,
Hmm.
and I had wanted to call it quits at some point along the way there, and I was told that if you did, then I would lose everything I'd worked for. So it was kind of okay. Well, I just need to work this debt off, which we did. We ended up, touring him. But again, that album, I mean, the previous album, we had a decent budget to make it. With Blue, we had very small budget. So we ended up doing it in a really small grotty studio in Bristol. And again, I produced it, and it sounds like it sounds very raw. But again, I listen to that now and I think, you know what, that there's something about that album that is raw, both in terms of the music, but also emotionally. I wrote that album actually amidst a marriage breakup,
Hmm.
and at the time, I didn't really realize that we were breaking up. But if you listen to the lyrics in retrospect, then you think, oh, there's lots of little telltale signs there, and obviously wasn't a very happy person when I was making that record.
Mhm. That's what kind of makes this interview so great because you're able to open this other side to your music that people probably would have never gotten from the
Yeah.
record.
Well, I mean, as I said, I think there's some good songs on there, just not recorded very well. Again, we would have benefited from a decent studio and a decent producer.
So the band was gone for a bit, but then new millennium, new beginning, and we have Aura.
You've got them all, haven't you? Yeah. Well, Aura, we came back and we got. I mean, we got the band back together in 1999, I think. I was living in California at the time, and trying to save the marriage that was falling apart. and failing in that. And then Craig called me and said, "Do you want to get the band back together and do an American tour? We've been offered a tour with the Gene Loves Jezebel and with Mike Peters from The Alarm." And as I said, which is marriage breaking up, and I was in a really low place at that point, and I just felt like it would do me good to go back out and play shows, get some kind of self-confidence back, because it really was at a low ebb. I mean, during that time I lived in California, I mean, I was trying to break into making music for films. I was doing a lot of remixes for Cleopatra Records, which was all a bit soul destroying, really. And I'd have friends like The Cure would come through town, and I'd get up on stage and play with them at the LA Forum. I played with them a couple of other times, and it was like, that's great. And then they get on their tour bus, and I get back in my car with my amp and drive home, and it was like, I wish I was on that tour bus. And Gary Newman came to town and he played, and I got and played with him, and it was, and it was when you see them getting back on their tour bus, it was like, I kind of miss it. So when Craig called me, it was quite an opportune moment, really, because as I said, the marriage had disintegrated at that point, and I really felt I needed to do something for myself to kind of regain some kind of self-confidence. So we went out and did the US 6-week US tour, which was good for me. And at the end of that, we decided to go and play a few shows in Britain and Portugal, I think. And then we toured a little bit more, and it was like, why don't we make a new record? Feels good, So we put Aura together, and I think, looking back at it, I think Aura's a good record, a good mission record. I think I was very conscious of making a mission record with that one, So I was kind of self-imposing parameters, if you want, with that record.
Definitely. I mean, if there was any doubt about the previous two albums, this one got the spirit back for sure.
Yeah, and it did. I mean, again, it is an album that did well in Europe, actually. I mean, it was number one in the German alternative chart for about 8 weeks, I think, which is, I wouldn't mind that these days. And and I think it was, and we went out and toured with him, actually. Fila is a friend, become a friend, but he was a big fan of the band, and he said, "Do you want to come out?" And they just gotten big, so they were playing arenas, and said, "Do you want to come out and tour with us?" It's like, yeah, go on then. So it was good, we got the band back together, but then it fell apart again. There was a lot of drinking and drugs involved in those days. And as you can see, I'm drinking water. I don't drink on tour anymore. And I certainly don't put anything up my nose other than my finger.
Well, you were able to kind of piece things together, because 6 years later, you did God Is a Bullet.
Yeah, completely different lineup. I was the only original member on that album. But yeah, I think that's a very underrated album. It's not necessarily a mission album, but it's a very good rock record. I think, again, it would have done if we'd had a producer who would say, Wayne, let's shorten some of these songs, let's cut this one out, and make it a B-side. If somebody that had been there to say that, I think it would have been an even better record. But it wasn't largely accepted by our audience, because it isn't particularly gothic. It's not particularly dark, although there are some dark subject matters on that record. But no, again, it was a fun record to make, but it was frustrating, the reaction we got to it, both in the media and from our audience. And I think at that point I thought, you know what, I want to go and try and do something else for a little while. So I broke the band up after that album.
It didn't last long, because you reunited with Craig and Simon. Made yourself a lot more visible on the US market and stages with this one.
Yeah, well, what happened was, in 2011, our manager at the time, he was saying, "We got to do a 25th anniversary show." I'm like, "Nah, I don't want to do it. I don't want that. I don't want to do it." But unbeknownst to me, he actually approached Simon and Craig to ask if they would do it, wanted to do it, and they both said yes. And then our manager came back to me and said, "Craig and Simon want to do it. come on, do it. You know, you'll make some money and everybody will love it and everything. It was like, and I talked about it with my wife, and she said, "Go on, yeah, you know, try it, just try it." So I said yes on the proviso that I would go and see Mick, the original drummer, and ask him to be involved. If it was going to be worth doing, I wanted everybody involved with the original lineup. Anyway, I went to see him, and he was up for doing it, but he hadn't played drums for 15 years. And so he borrowed a drum kit from someone, set it up in his cellar, and then and he started to play again. And he called me and said, "Well, I can't do it." I said, "I played for half an hour, and I have to take a week off work." You know, if I come on tour with you, I'm going to be carried off in an oxygen tent every night. You know, I can't do it. Really, you know, I'd love to do it, but you got my blessing to go ahead if you want to do it with someone else, which was, you know, very, very, very typical of Mick.
Yeah.
So we got Mike Kelly in, who had played with both Craig and Simon previously. So we got him in, and then went out and did 25th anniversary shows, which sold out 6 months in advance. I mean, it was crazy. Really, I was like, wow. And then we did that, and we did another tour, and then obviously being out playing, it was like, why don't we make a record? And at that point, I've been writing songs, but I hadn't been writing them specifically for the mission. A lot of what I was listening to was old blues, Delta blues, and Hank Williams and Johnny Cash, Bob Dylan, you know, stuff that I'd been aware of. But because I found the music of the day, the 2000s, basically, I mean, I look back at that period, I can't think of very many records that I like from that period, you know,
Um,
the 2000s. And so I was, instead of listening to, I don't know, Kings of Leon or whatever, you know, it's like, for me anyway, you know, I went back in time, and I started, and, you know, I mean, I obviously heard Johnny Cash before, and I obviously heard Bob Dylan, but I actually really got into particularly Bob Dylan, you know, to the point of being a zealot. You know, I got it after all these years.
in that time.
Sorry?
Some amazing records in that time. His later period is quite outstanding.
It's this whole canon is amazing. I mean, yeah, there's a few dodgy ones, but then if you make that many records, same with Neil Young, you know. I mean, he makes one good one every three, maybe, you know, and which ain't a bad ratio, you know, when you're as prolific as they are.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
so the songs I was writing were mostly on acoustic guitar or piano for that period. And then it was like, okay, well, let's do an album. So a lot of the songs we kind of did, and as I said, they're not necessarily mission songs, but they're some great songs on there. Like I'm trying to think of them now. One about the Bible. But the Bible can't save me. What's it? I can't remember the title.
I'm trying to look it up. Litany for the Faithful, is it?
Deadly for the Faithful. Yes, that's a good song. But that, again, is, you know, it was written for the audience as an acoustic song. But then there's go for the track listing. Actually, there's Black Cat Bone, and there is
Everything But the Squeal,
yeah, that's rocker. That's a rocker.
Drag, uh, Born Under a Good Sign, The Girl in a Fur-Skin Rug,
Yeah.
The Trap. Oh, Ain't No
Yeah.
Prayer Bible can Save Me.
Yeah, the trap, the trap, and the Bible songs. I mean, really, they're not mission songs. They are like Johnny Cash or Hank Williams or Bob Dylan, in my opinion. You know, that's what I was listening to at the time. Well, you know, we made a record, and again, there's a lot of Mission fans like a bit confused by it, but you know, you can't make records for your audience. You got to make it for yourself.
It was
And
a statement, in my opinion.
sorry.
An interesting statement, in my opinion, that record.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you know, as we come back and it's like everybody expecting, I don't know what they were expecting, but I guess they were expecting more of a mission sound. We went in and basically recorded that with just two guitars, bass, and drums. very little overdubs.
Back to basics.
And
Um,
yeah.
and then we have another Fall from Grace. Now that's an interesting record. Many describe this album as a link between First and Last and Always and your first, uh, God's Own Medicine. Would you agree with that as well?
Well, no, that's not strictly true. Not many people. I said that once, and I wish I hadn't because it keeps getting quoted back at me. Um, I I tell you what happened. As I told you, I was in touch with Billy Corgan, and he said, "Have you played First and Last and Always recently?" I said, "I haven't listened to that in 30 years." You know, he said, "Play it." I said, "Really?" He said, "Yeah, play." You know, so I had to drive into Sao Paulo one day, which is like a 2.5 hour drive. So I put the CD in the car, and I put it on, listened to it from start to finish for the first time in 30 years or more, or however long. And I was like pleasantly surprised. I mean, it's not the most hi-fi of albums, but for attitude and
Spirit.
songs, lyrics, for the tone of it's a great album. That for them, and it just made me realize. So it made me want to get my 12-string electric guitar out again because I hadn't been using that so much over the previous few years. And so I started writing songs on the 12 string, and that immediately gives it, I don't know if you want, for want of a better expression, the Wayne Hussey signature sound, you know. So you got that chime, you got that, all the arpeggios and stuff, the way that I play guitar, and then yeah, I guess at some point I said it's the missing link between those two albums, but listening to it as a whole, I actually think that album, Another Fall from Grace, is actually encompasses the whole of the Mission history. Actually, it's all on that record in terms of that there are songs like Blue, there are songs like from Mask, could be from Mask. There are songs like from God Is a Bullet. You know what I'm saying? It's not just harking back to the 1980s. I
No.
think it's yeah, it encompasses the whole history of the band, I think, in terms of sound. And I've said this before, if it has to be the last record we ever make, then I think it's a good one to go on. But saying that, I have started writing some new songs and some new tunes. We've actually been practicing a couple in soundchecks and rehearsals, and hope. I mean, we did play one in, where was it, the other night? We're having such a good time. It was like, you know what? I haven't got any lyrics for this song. I told the audience, but I'm going to channel my light language. And so we did one of the new songs, and I just kind of made up words. Yeah, light language, And then and we played the new song, and they seemed to like it, and it's definitely got a Mission guitar hook in it. So that was fun to do.
So now that I get you in that retrospective mood, when you look back from the beginning to the last one, how would you describe the evolution of the Mission in a sense?
That's your job, not mine. You're the journalist.
I'm just trying to get your take.
The evolution. Well, I mean, I guess we started off, coming from the Sisters, we were perceived, as a goth band. And although I guess we would always contend otherwise, I mean, you look back at some of the songs, some of the song titles, they're a bit incriminating, Sacrilege and Wake and Wasteland, Serpent's Kiss. I guess, it's like, okay, maybe maybe we were a little bit gothic. I mean, I remember being asked, are you goths or hippies? And then we're goppies. I the way I look at us, I'm not going to sit here and say we're not goth, because obviously a large proportion of our audience have been very loyal to us and are from that scene. I don't particularly feel goth. My house is painted yellow for one. The interior is not black, and we don't have coffins and that kind of thing. But I would say we're a classic rock band. we're more like a 70s classic rock band before punk. We've
There's
got
the
a bit of punk. We've got a bit of punk in us, but I think we've also, we've got that classic rock element too.
I definitely have to agree. And the odd thing is, I mean, I cover a lot of heavy metal bands, hard rock, underground metal.
Uh-huh.
I sensitive side, there is place for bands like The Mission, which I love, and
And the church, like you.
Church and New Order and Joy Division. And the funny thing is, when I saw you live last time in Chicago, there were a lot of people who from the heavy metal scene who love The Mission.
Mhm.
Because I don't think it works the other way around.
No, probably not. I mean, no, I mean, obviously we love Zeppelin and I love Pink Floyd. Pink Floyd, the first band I ever saw live. I mean, I'm not a huge fan of Black Sabbath, but there are one or two of their songs I like. It was a bit too heavy for me, but I know Craig and Simon like it. That's the music we grew up on, the period that we first started listening to music. I mean, I was listening to T-Rex and David Bowie, Roxy music, and at the same time, I was probably the only kid in school that was listening to that, but also listening to Pink Floyd and Wishbone Ash and Led Zeppelin. It was you're either a pop kid or a rock kid. But I've always, I just like guitar music, I suppose. I mean, love the Beatles. My favorite band of the last 30 years are Radiohead, Massive Attack, which are, those, love those two bands. And, but for the Mission, again, that's that I think we are. We've got all the elements of classic rock in there, but obviously there's more modern elements because we use sequencers every now and then, and and bits and pieces, drum machines and stuff. But that's how I look at us these days. My shirts aren't goth.
Um, we've mentioned Sisters recently because of that little connection and you playing those songs again with Billy. Um, since leaving the band, have you had any contact with Andrew at all?
Some contact, minimal contact during the 90s, and we played a couple of festivals with him, with the Sisters, the Mission, the Sisters, one maybe actually, but no. In all honesty, I mean, I'm going to ask you the same question in a way. Do you keep in touch with people that you worked with 35 years ago?
Oh, very unlikely.
There
However,
you go. There you go. Maybe one or two, but
these people, I'm sure a conversation would follow. So in return to your question, my question was, if let's say you ran into each other backstage at some festival, would there be a conversation for the
I would approach him. I'd probably go up and give him a hug and a kiss, but he'd probably recoil.
That's a beautiful thing because life is way too short.
Absolutely. I mean, there was a time, I don't know, when they came down to Sao Paulo, where I live in Brazil, and they were playing in Sao Paulo. It must be 10, 12 years ago now, actually. And I asked our manager, he knew their tour manager. I said, see if get me on the guest list. I'll go down and say hello and see them, see what they're like. And got back a message saying, no fucking way. It's like, all right, whatever.
You can't hold that against you. You tried.
I don't care. I really don't care. I mean, he, my memories of Andrew, when we were in the Sisters of Mercy, I really passionately believed in the band. We were one of the best bands in the world at the time. We made a great album, but there was so much trauma and stress and just I don't know, just intellectual battles going on all the time with him, and life's too. I just want to be in a band and have fun, you know, and that's the same for Craig. We just wanted to go and have fun and have fun with the music and on the road, but it was just everything was just difficult with Andrew. I don't I don't know what he's like now, but I hear stories and I don't think he's essentially changed.
Well, let's leave it at that on that topic.
Mm.
Um, you've mentioned producers several times or lack thereof. What does it take to become a producer and truly capture the mission?
Well, I think the person, if I wanted to make a record that sounds like the mission, inverted commas, I would always go to Tim Palmer, who did our first album. He did Carved in Sand. He co-produced the first album with us. Then he produced Carved in Sand. And he's done the odd remix here and there. He also mixed another Fall from Grace for me. I went to his, he'd got a place in Austin, and I went there for a couple of weeks and mixed that, let him mix that. But I, pop in every day and make suggestions. And if I wanted to make a mission sounding record, I would always go to Tim. And Tim's very good at recognizing the strengths that we have and nurturing them. Whereas I kind of like to break the formula every time I go in to make a record. I kind of like to try and, I don't know, push the envelope if you want, and I try my hardest not to sound like the mission if you want. So, Tim is very good at pulling me back into doing what I'm good at, I guess. Yeah, I mean, let's say Tim would be my go-to person. Unfortunately, he's got a family, lives and works from home in Austin now, so he doesn't go out and produce anymore. But working in a studio on recordings with him, I always really enjoyed that. He works really fast, and he captures rather than being meticulous, he captures a spirit. You see, for me, a song is always at its most potent when it's first written. When I first sing it for the first time, I might make some notes, I might not hit the notes, I might not get the melody right, might not get the phrasing right, but for me, it's the most potent. I mean, after 2 or 3 takes, it then becomes technique. It becomes, technique comes in and replaces that potency. And with Tim, he was very good at getting the best out of me in that sense. If I didn't get it in the first, if I didn't get it in the first 2 or 3 takes, then he said, "Forget it. We'll come back to it another time with the vocals."
You also released a large number of live recordings.
Yeah.
The live presentation for you as a band.
Sorry?
How important is the live presentation for you as a band?
Well, we're out touring. The last 2 years, we've done a lot of touring. We're going to be doing a lot more touring this year. We like playing live, and I think in some respects, many respects, actually, we're a better live than we've never really captured what we are live on a record. I don't think. They're 2 separate mediums anyway. I mean, if you went in to try to make a live album in the studio, it probably wouldn't have all the nuances and the dynamics and stuff. But as a live band, we're a very good live band, I think, and for whatever reason, there are there's a faction of our audience that love the live albums, and I'd rather we had control over them than coming out on bootleg and having no control over it. Obviously, it helps makes us a bit of money too. We need to earn, we need to live, and obviously making records these days is very expensive. We don't make as much, anywhere near as much as we used to on making records. So, however we can supplement our income, we'll do it. So, yeah, we've released 2 or 3 live ones over the last few years, but they've been good. I think they're not like they're not like crappy live albums. They really capture something special. I mean, there've been shows we've recorded and I've listened to it. Nah, that's not good enough. So there could have been a lot more.
Yeah. Also, at one point, you were known as Mission UK, especially in the United States. What caused this, and what actually caused you eventually to drop that UK?
Well, it was only in the US. I mean, we were the mission everywhere else in the world. When we first came over, when we released God So Medicine in 1986, I think it might have been 87 here actually. But whenever we first released it here, there was a black funk group from Philadelphia called Mission. They just split up actually, but they'd release records under the name Mission. So the record label, to avoid any, not comparisons, but to avoid any kind of legal comeback, they said you need to add the UK to the moniker. So that's what we did. We ended up putting the UK. I mean, it's not a big deal. Although now, obviously, Mission, the Black Funk band from Philadelphia, haven't existed for 40 years or whatever, nearly 40 years. So I think we can lay claim to the name of the Mission now. And so we are trying to phase it out over here bit by bit. But there are still promoters that insist on putting UK on the posters. But we try to get it smaller and smaller till next time it'll be tiny.
How to think of it, I kind of like that because it did have like a mysterious ring to it.
What? The Mission UK? Well, if you abbreviate that, it's muck.
It is. Ah. um, finally, we've covered a lot of ground here. When you look back at it all, how fulfilling was it for you, or is?
Well, I'm still doing it. I love music. I mean, and obviously it's nice to go out and make a big racket with the boys. But I also have this, I mean, I do other things. I'm at the moment working on a project with my wife, which is kind of very ambient, called Archeometer. Look it up. Spell Archeometre. We've only released 2 tracks so far, but it's a million miles away from the Mission. Basically, I come up with music, very, very chill, ambient. I don't know how you would describe it, to be honest. And my wife puts vocals to it, and she doesn't sing lyrics as such. It's more of kind of a Liz Fraser, Lisa Gerrard kind of thing, so it's more vocals. Have a listen to it. It's really, I find it really beautiful and really relaxing. There's not a track under 16 minutes long. I'll tell you why. How this project started was when I released my last book, I did some short readings from it, as an incentive for fans to buy the pre-sale. So if you bought pre-sale, then you would get a short excerpt of me reading the book every month. And I did that, and I thought, oh, yeah, it's all right, but wouldn't it be nice to put some music behind it? So I had them there, and I put the keyboard there, found a nice string sound or a nice with a bit of reverb and stuff. Then I just improvised underneath it, purely improvisations, and it's not played to a grid. There's no click track. And then I took the voice away, and it was like, it's quite nice actually. I feel like I might do an album like this, or kind of ambient kind of, music or whatever you want to call it. And then my wife heard it and she said, "Do you mind if I ever go to singing on that?" It's like, be my guest, So she sings a little bit. She's an actress, but she also sings a little bit. So I set the microphone up in for her in the control room in the studio, and then left her to it. Do what you think. And then 2 days later she calls me in, and 3 days later and calls me in, and it's like a million vocal tracks. It's like, all right, we have to cherry pick here, but and that's how we've been doing it. And we've got our 3rd track coming out in a couple of weeks. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I have a problem sleeping, so I listen to a lot of ambient music, falling asleep. And one thing that bugs me is that on Spotify playlists, each track is like 5-6 minutes long, and then it changes to another track, and that kind of wakes me up again. So the idea behind it, the 16, 17 minutes, I mean, there's one track 25 minutes long. Behind that is that you just kind of lose yourself in it, and it just washes over you, and it just calms you, and it's not like a new track coming up every 5-6 minutes, I mean, that's kind of the idea behind it. But it's have a listen, see what you think. Be interested in.
Looks like you still are moving forward musically.
Yeah, I love music. I told you, and I love playing. I could play the piano, I could play the guitar, and I could pretty much play any instrument you put in front of me, apart from the drums. but then you got drum machines and anything I got to blow. I can't play it. But anything else with strings or fingers and things, I can play. I can get tunes out of them. And it's for me, it seems, I don't know, churlish to say it's easy, but I can pick up a guitar or sit at the piano and I just come up with new stuff all the time. It's new music all the time. It's just something that I have, an ability that I have that started really because when I first started playing guitar, I couldn't play anybody else's songs, so I made up my own.
Yeah.
Simple as that. And that's kind of stood me in good stead.
Looks like you found your calling.
Yeah, well, yeah, yeah, well, it's a bit late if I haven't. I'm 66 this month.
Right. Wayne, thank you so much for speaking with me and giving me
My
so much
pleasure.
info. I'm sure a lot of people watching this will be appreciating hearing all this firsthand from you, and they might go back and re-listen to some of these albums and try to find some of the things you mentioned.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, and listen to the new stuff too. Listen to Archeon. I don't know if you smoke or anything, but maybe have a little joint and listen to it. Oh, drift off.
That's right. Thank you so much. You have a great night, and
Yeah.
see each other in Chicago.
Okay. Yeah. Next time, come say hello.
Yes, I definitely will.
Okay, take care.
Thank you.
Bye bye.